Welcome back. We have the final candidate that we are having you set out on our grilling machine. Just kidding, there won't be much grilling going on. Vivek, thanks so much for coming back.
Thanks for having me.
All right, the end is near. Next week, how do you feel so far?
I think it's been a very interesting week and a half. I know that I've been involved in campaigns before, but it's definitely different being a candidate and knowing that every single day you're just a bit closer to the result, and like what can you do to really work harder, what can you do to kind of change things, or where you're at, I have no idea. So I think that the next few days will definitely be testing, and I think that it'll be a ton of fun.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Adam, start.
All right, so you put a big emphasis in your platform on mental health. You talk about the Mental Health Commission. One of the big gaps at the USC is our ability to do research, or perhaps our lack of ability to do research. What are your plans to develop the USC's research capacity next year, knowing that we don't have a lot of money to invest in new staff?
I know that the USC has a lot of lines for interns, and what we should do is we should probably look at either reallocating the existing resources we have in our staff to start looking into more research, and also using our intern ability to start getting more involved in research. And let's start hiring students who have an interest in that field so that we can really build up and ramp up that arm of the USC so that our research abilities will be enhanced, and we can do things like a mental health commission. We can collaborate, and we can have data that's effective for every student.
Okay, thank you.
So I just have a question about O Week. You've mentioned before that including clubs is a great way to expand O Week, make it a little more valuable for first-year students. How are you planning on doing this, and do you think it will be too busy? This has been one of the pressing questions for you.
I know that the Orientation Week program is definitely going into a very progressive and a new, fresh kind of direction. And I know that one of the big priorities is to make sure that every student at Western, especially when they're in first year, feels like they're welcome and that they have people who they can relate with and people who can share their interests. And I think what we need to do is when it comes to clubs and when it comes to how busy it is and logistics, we have to really phase it in. We have to look at how can we implement it, and we need proposals. We need to make sure that the programming is great and that the programming fits. So definitely it's not open the floodgates and let everyone kind of hop onto campus, but I think that it's a step-by-step process, and I know that we'll be successful in that.
Okay.
Pat's talked a lot about making sure that softs are heard and that their voices are heard at the USC. What are your plans to make sure that softs' voices are heard next year? Because obviously the USC isn't doing quite a good enough job in making sure that there are voices to our table.
I agree with you. I think that from what we've seen I guess what I've seen over the past few years as a head soft and as someone who's been involved in the Orientation Week program, I know that there's still a lot of frustration, and I think a large part of that frustration stems from the decision-making bodies, especially the Orientation Planning Committee and the Orientation Governance Board. And I think what we should be doing is we should, first off, make those bodies a lot more transparent. That's very easy to say, but I think we really need to use the representatives, the head softs who are on that committee, the elected representatives on that committee, the VPSC, and every stakeholder to make sure that they start disseminating information, that they actually follow through on their word, and that we do stick to deadlines, that we don't change deadlines midway. And then after that, when it comes to making sure people are heard, we should definitely use those elected representatives, make sure that people are communicated with. And I think that's a step in the right direction.
Definitely. All right, so Ms. Woods mentioned at the last debate trying to get a seat on the board on the LTC. Just wondering how feasible you think this would be, and is it a step in the right direction, and how can you make it a step in the right direction?
I think when it comes to advocacy, we really need to start looking at what do we want, what are the ideals of the organization, and how can we best represent students. And lobbying or advocating for a seat on the LTC board is definitely not something you can easily snap your fingers and get it done tomorrow. But it's something that we want to be able to have a voice at that table. And I think it's definitely not easy, but it's something we want to do. It's something that we think that students deserve, and I think that maybe over time, since we do negotiate quite a large contract for the bus pass, it's not something that's completely impossible or something that's unrealistic at all.
Definitely.
We do negotiate a very large contract with the LTC, but the bus pass in London is actually amongst the cheapest bus passes in the province. And the LTC is going to be opening that contract up for renegotiation next year. One of the concerns that we have is the fact that the LTC may come to a point where they say that it actually will make them more money for students to pay full price than it would be for them to charge this $190 fee up front. How would you approach the situation next year? How would you approach that negotiation, knowing that the LTC will likely be looking for a significant increase on students?
I think our #1 priority is to make sure that students always are in the best financial position they can be. And it's not acceptable for me, or for the executive, or for, I guess, students in general, for prices, especially the bus pass, to start going up. And I know that's very obvious, of course, but I think what we need to say is that that's not acceptable, and we need to start using our resources. We need to start holding people accountable. We need to go to the mayor's office. We need to actually collaborate with our stakeholders and collaborate with our partners in the city and with the university, and say that no, that's not what we want. That's definitely not in the best interest of students, and I don't think it's the best interest of the city either, especially to make sure that students are even more taxed.
Many people in the city would say that it would be completely acceptable to raise the price of the bus pass because at the moment, citizens of London who ride the bus are subsidizing the cost for students. What do you say to those people?
Students are a large part of the city when it comes to the potential, and when it comes to the future, when it comes to working with startups and all the different aspects of the university, especially small business. And I think that what we need to say is that students are part of the city. And contrary to popular belief, we are taxpayers, and we do have a stake in this. So it's easy for someone in London or a resident, a long-time resident, to say that students aren't a part of the city, but I would beg to differ.
One of the points on your platform is initiating fair trade across campus, and there is already a social responsibility promise in place where we use local ingredients from London farmers as much as we possibly can. So how are you planning on taking that and making it better?
So I think what we need to do is we need to really start looking at fair trade standards in those industries and in those organizations, and really implementing them here. And I think what our fair trade stance is that, example, for the Spoke and the Wave, we really need to make sure we get rid of things like Tetley, and we need to make sure that everything that we sell and everything that we do is fair trade and kind of follows along those guidelines. I think the social responsibility clause, or that mission of the university is great, but I think that we need to start working with the university and hospitality service and multiple stakeholders on campus to really head towards that general direction.
Many of the university's food outlets are franchises, and we have a number of Tim Hortons. There's like 2 or 3. Okay, there's more than that. But there's a lot of franchises on campus is the point. How are you going to convince those franchise outlets to go fair trade as well, and do you think you'll make any progress with that?
I think that our first step, especially when it comes to the fair trade discussions and negotiations, it's that places like Tim Hortons would definitely be tough, and I'm not trying to take away Tim Hortons coffee by any means. I think that I'd be dealing with quite the riot on my hands if I did that. But what we need to do is we need to start looking at the non-franchise aspects first, and we need to start looking at different vendors on campus and places where we can easily collaborate and agree on, and then start tackling other issues and issues that students agree with next.
All right, I have a question for you about your proposed financial aid commissioner. The USC just recently got rid of the financial aid commissioner, and the reason that we did that is because we were able to convince the university to take over this program. Our philosophy as an executive has been to call the university to responsibility for these kind of things and make them responsible for running this kind of programming. This year, they ran their first session, and the attendance at that session was equivalent to the total of all attendees at our program last year. What is your plan going to do better? And is this potentially going against our philosophy of asking the university to take responsibility for these things?
Absolutely no. I don't think that it's going against any type of philosophy. I think that what we want to do is we want to be a liaison. We want to be a bridge. There's still a lot of students, even though that maybe that session totaled more than the entire year, which is great. I'm really happy about that. But what we need to say and what we need to do is really bridge students to those different possibilities. We need to collaborate, and that person can be the point person on that, and to work with other organizations for financial literacy. Because just because the university is doing it doesn't mean that other people can't do it. Doesn't mean that we can bring other people to the table. And when it comes to financial literacy, I don't think you can get enough. But I think the role should be different. I don't think we should just be solely holding these sessions by ourselves, because as you said, they weren't as successful. So I think that as a student organization and as a student government dealing with post-secondary issues that face all students, financial literacy and financial knowledge in general is something that we should still have within our organization.
Yeah, definitely. All right, last question. Do you have a pressing one that you'd like to ask?
We should probably touch on the buffet at the Wave. The Wave doesn't open between 9 and 11 usually, and you've proposed that we open the Wave from 9 to 11. That will increase our staff costs. As well, buffets are fairly expensive to run, and it's also probably likely that not many students will be on campus between 9 and 11 who aren't in class. What do you think about these comments, and do you still think this plan is feasible?
when I looked into this plan, I love breakfast. PS, it's honestly awesome. And usually when I'm on campus at that time, I wish that there was something I could kind of go to instead of just getting a breakfast sandwich. And I checked with every single level of management, right down from the food and beverage manager of the Spoke and the Wave, right up to Tony Ayala, the VP Finance, and everybody in between. And they said it was doable. But the way we want to implement it is that we want to start a pilot project in the first semester and say, how can we actually implement this? And is this the best solution? And just from consensus, from talking to students, from talking to staff, from talking to administrators, they said, yes, definitely try this. This is a place where we haven't really gone to. We haven't really taken a stab at it. And this is what they've been telling me. And they said they're willing to try it again if that's the wish of the USC executive. And I think that I'd love to try it. And I think that we do have to consider costs, especially when it comes to breakfast. You never make money on breakfast unless you're hitting economies of scale. And I don't think you will hit economies of scale at the Wave and Spoke, and you have to look at it as a service. But you always have to make sure that you're being financially intelligent when you're making these kind of decisions. So we have to look at how does it impact the bottom line. But at the same time, I'm more than willing to try it. People have given the green light, so why not?
Well, breakfast is most meal of the day. With that, Vivek, thank you so much for coming on. It's always a pleasure. Good luck with the rest of the ways, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for having me.
No problem.